Hey everyone, Parallel here. Welcome to Star Trek Online. Here it is. This is the Tier 6 Multi-Mission Explorer Science Vessel, aka the Tier 6 Vesta. You are looking at the Romulan Warbird version of this ship. That is one of the nice things about the Tier 6 Vestas is they come in a different version for each faction. So each faction gets their own version, and within each faction there are also 3 variants. So there's a total of 9 different possibilities with this ship. So what I'd like to do in this video is give a full overview of this ship, do a full breakdown, and also provide a little bit of a comparison between all the 3 different faction versions and then also the 3 different variants that are available. In case any of you out there are only interested in purchasing one of these ships, or one particular variant, hopefully this will help you narrow down that selection and choose the one that is right for your playstyle. They are all very similar, but there are just a couple of differences that I will take some time to highlight. Now I'd also like to share with you a build that I'm using on this ship. I am calling this build the Cone of Death. It is basically a hybrid cannon / exotic damage build, and it has a lot of forward firing abilities, including some consoles that give it this Cone of Death flair. It has a, of course, cannon scatter volley, which is also a frontal cone ability. Basically anything you're going to put in front of this build in that frontal 45-degree arc is going to be absolutely melted. So that is the theme of this build that I will be showing you. And I do want to show it to you on the Romulan version of this ship for one particular reason, because there is a console I'm using that is much more available on the Romulans and Klingons. And that plus the fact I do like the Romulan version because it also comes with a battle cloak. So that is what I'll be doing this video on in particular, but you could apply this to any of the Tier 6 Vestas. This build will work on any of them. Alright, so first off, I thought I would jump right into the action and start off with a CCA run and do a parse and break down the damage so you can see how this build will actually perform. And after that, I'll go through, of course, the full build, go through all the details, all the equipment, all the skills, traits, bridge officer seating, Doffs, everything. Go through the whole build in detail. Also, I would like to show you the Admiralty Card. We'll also cover some of the ship visuals as well. And then finally, I think we'll finish off with I'm going to go do an Argala Run. And we'll take the Argala Run a little bit slow and go through and actually show you all the different consoles that are available on the 3 variants and see what they look like in action. So you will be able to understand how each of them operate. Sometimes it's a little bit hard, like in a CCA run, to see how all the consoles and everything work. There's so much ability spam going on. So that is how we will finish off the video. All right, but first, like I said, let's jump right into the action and get going on a CCA, and yeah, we'll see how this build actually works. All right, here we go. Let's do this CCA. Now, if you're wondering why I chose CCA to test this out, it is because exotic damage abilities are really good against the crystalline entity. Alright, let's go ahead and get sensor analysis going. Let's go ahead and get the Cone of Death build going here. Full entropy, let's use Entropic. Wow, this thing's going down fast. This thing is getting annihilated very quickly. Wow, that was a quick one. Yep, there's definitely someone else here doing a lot of DPS. But there you go. That is the Cone of Death build against the crystalline entity. Let's go ahead and, let's see, get the rewards here. Let's head out and check out the parse. And that was really, really quick. Alright, so let's do a breakdown of that run, see how this build did. So if you just give me a minute here, I'm going to pull up my parser and I will bring it up here in OBS. So there we go. That is the CCA run on this ship. And as you can see, it did quite well. Now that was actually a very fast run. So that really helps out your DPS on the DPS meter. But you can see here, I did get 213k on that run. I could just show you on a previous run here. I got 128k. That was a much longer run. As you can see, the rest of the DPS contribution was quite low, so it was a much longer run. And of course, as you know, DPS is damage divided by time. So if anything that extends the length of the run is going to, of course, decrease your DPS, because when you're dividing by time, the bigger the time, the less your DPS. So if you can get in a nice, real fast run and just unload all your abilities while all your buffs are still up, that is how you can get these really high numbers here. So let's go ahead and bring up my particular breakdown of, let's pull up my character here. Now, let me see, I also got it's a different window here. Let's pull that up. All right, so there you go. So this is the actual breakdown of the damage. So this is what, each piece of this build and how it performs. You'll be able to see here, and the different damage contribution from everything. Now, first thing is, pets here is actually the anti-time entanglement, singularity, reputation ability, which actually scales incredibly well with exotic damage. So with your exotic damage generator, it is going to do, or exotic particle generator is going to do a lot of damage with this ability. It's very good for padding out your DPS on the crystalline entity. Hits super hard, but it does show up as a pet, and that one did 31,000 DPS. Plasma explosions are very high on this build, and I will explain that when I get into a little more detail, but they are a major contribution as part of this build. So that we were looking at 25,000 DPS. Entropic redistribution, a very, very good temporal ability. Yes, you can see the max one hit there was almost 200k. This thing hits like a truck. And that was, of course, I launched that off when I was at max entropy, so it does really good damage. 20k DPS there. Gravity Well 3 also came in very good, 18,000 DPS. Okay, so one of the cones of the Cone of Death is the Delphic Tear Generator. That came in at 16,000 DPS. Scatter Volley is up there. As you know, the crystalline entity is somewhat resistant to energy weapon damage. So kind of brought that down a little bit. If you do like a standard, ISA or any other run where almost any other faction where your energy weapons are doing normal damage, this will be also actually much higher contributor in the build. But on CCA, you can see it's down here at 14,000 DPS. The Deteriorating Secondary Deflector also did 14,000. That is quite high. I'm kind of surprised. Deteriorating Secondary Deflectors, I believe, are the best secondary deflector. They do seem to parse the best when you're using Destabilizing Resonance Beam, which also came in right around 14,000 DPS. Let's go down a little bit here. Now the Plasma Particle Emission Torpedo, this is the torpedo I'm using. This is the radiation cloud that it generates, which scales with exotic damage. That is up at 13,000. The plasma turrets with Scatter Volley were about 9,000. The Torp Spread itself did about 9,000. I'm actually kind of surprised by that as well. Usually the clouds, the radiation clouds from, in this particular build, are what do the most damage. I don't really have any torpedo abilities to buff that up other than Torp Spread. So I'm kind of surprised that did so much damage. But again, the entity is more vulnerable to torpedoes as opposed to energy weapons. Feedback Pulse did 7,000. I did not have much aggro in that run, so not a whole lot there. Entropic Rider was right up there at about 6,000. Radiation Bombardment, this is the other Cone of Death. This is a little bit lower than I thought it would be, coming in at only 3,400 DPS. Channel Deconstruction, which is mostly just for building up entropy, came in at a little under 3,000. And we're getting down into just the minor contributions here. Just it looks like a torpedo did go off without Torp Spread, Feedback Pulse, and a Proton, not a whole lot. And there you go, just very other minor contributions there. When I go back to the pets, you can see that the Scorpions did not contribute much at all. They were not out for very long. And as you know, fighters get wiped out by the explosions in the CCA. So pets, honestly, like hanger pets, don't contribute much at all. But there you go. That is a 213K breakdown. So that's actually one of my better runs, honestly, on this ship. Because it was such a fast run. You can see there were other people who were doing also very high DPS. That makes the run so fast. That really boosts up your damage output. All right, so that is the damage breakdown. So that is what you can expect from this build. Let me go ahead and hide those windows and get back here. That is what you can expect from this build. And that is what I'm going to go into now into full detail. Let's go ahead and bring up the UI. I'll go into full detail here, but I do want to do one thing just to bring it back a little bit and give an overview of the ship itself. All right, and what what the layout of the ship is and everything else. And to help with that, I'm going to go ahead and beam down to the surface here and go to the hangar. Because these Tier 6 Vestas are a hell of a lot of fun. And they have some strengths and weaknesses, and I can kind of, I'd like to do a little bit of a comparison here. I have all three variants, and let's head down here to the shuttle bay and talk to this guy. I'll do a little bit of comparison because I have all three. I could show the different consoles and everything else, but let's just first start out here and go through the overview of the ship, just the stats, like the base stats here. All right, so here is... oh, and yeah, if you're wondering how to get these ships, they are available in the C-Store. These are C-Store ships. They are Tier 6. And there is a nice big bundle you can get, which is the Super Pack. Where are you? Right there. So there you go. All 9 ships. This, I believe, is 120... 12,000 Zen, I believe, for the full pack. If you do have lots of alts, I would definitely recommend to get the full pack. But if you're just going for one character and you're just looking at one variant, just get the one, and you can go for it that way. If you're just, if you're buying Zen with dilithium, it'd probably be quite a bit to get the full pack. So you might be just going after one particular variant. So that is it. And just a quick note, these are at fleet level, right? So they are fleet level ships. They do have the extra little bit of hull and shield, and they do have the 11 console slots. Not sure where that came from. 11 console slots of fleet ships. So they already have fleet level, which is nice to know. There are some other ones, like if you're just looking at the Tier 6 Valiant, Malum, and Core, these are actually not fleet level. You have to upgrade them. So these ones are at fleet level already. And let me go ahead and bring the info back up here. Just go through the stats. Let's just quickly read here, because these are actually kind of interesting ships on the Romulan side. They're actually a combination, as you can tell from the visuals, you could probably guess that you can almost see a little bit of the Vulcan deck here kind of combined into a warbird, and that's essentially what these ships are. It's kind of an interesting background, and I think it actually makes sense within the lore of Star Trek Online, because in Star Trek Online, the Romulans that you play is the Romulan Republic, which is not the Tal Shiar. So the Romulan Republic kind of broke off, and they're much more willing to do, like, say, reunification with Vulcans. So it kind of makes sense that the Romulan Republic, if they developed some new science ship, it would have some Vulcan technology in there. I think it really fits well. I really like the theme of these ships and how they look on the Romulan side. And it's kind of funny. It's almost like they took the disc portion of the Dakir and put like the Romulan the warp core singularity right in the middle of it. It looks really great. So we'll take a look at that more when I go into the visuals. But all right, so this is the particular variant that I was using for this build, and this is the tactical variant. So here it is, the Sir Hula Reconnaissance Explorer Warbird is among the most advanced starships within the Romulan fleet. It was built upon the success of Starfleet's Aventine-class multi-mission explorer. That was the Tier 5 Vesta. The tactical variant was the Aventine, which is an awesome ship. I had a lot of fun with the Tier 5 Vestas. In fact, one of my most popular build videos was the original Tier 5 Vesta build that I did with an exotic damage build. And I've loved the Vestas ever since, and these Tier 6 ones are definitely a very nice upgrade. So it's designed for both reconnaissance and combat. This tactical multi-mission variant comes equipped with the Radiation Bombardment Matrix. That is the console that is part of my Cone of Death build. And it will unleash waves of harmful radiation upon enemies, so it does radiation damage. I'll show you all that good stuff. All of these ships come with a universal temporal operative Lieutenant Commander Universal Temporal Operative Specialist Bridge Officer seat. And that's kind of a plus and a minus, so I'll talk about that when we get into the actual bridge officer layout. But let's actually just take a look at the stats here. Right, so it is tier 6. Now hull strength, you're looking at 38,000 hull at base at level 60. Which is pretty low. You're looking at around, like maybe slightly more than an escort. So not the strongest hull strength, but it does have a very nice 1.35 shield modifier. So like most science vessels, has a nice high shield modifier. But definitely not a very sturdy ship, which is okay because this thing actually flies a lot like an escort. It's very maneuverable for a science vessel, particularly for a science vessel with a hangar bay, which this does have. So fore and aft weapons, it's got 3-3 weapon configuration, very standard for a science vessel. A little bit disappointed in this. I was really hoping the Romulan version, since it is a warbird, and Romulans, do like their frontal weapons. I was kind of hoping it would have the 4-2 configuration on the Romulan version. I think that's kind of a missed opportunity there. It also comes with 3 device slots, and then the bridge officer seating. So it comes with 1 Lieutenant Commander Tactical, 1 Lieutenant Engineering, Commander Science, Ensign Universal, and then of course that featured Lieutenant Commander Universal / Temporal. So this seating has some advantages and disadvantages here. One thing I really like about this seating is the Ensign Universal. Because just as a quick comparison, if you're looking at the other top science vessels with hangar bays, like if you're looking at the Eternal or at the Edolg, the sphere builder version of the ship, it has those both have Ensign Science. They don't get the Ensign Universal. So I really like the extra flexibility of that Ensign Universal on these particular ships. I think the only kind of downside is that the temporal seat is tied to the Universal. Maybe it would have been a little bit nicer to have the temporal on the Commander Science, because both the Edolg and the Eternal do have that. So it's kind of a give or take. But the one nice thing about having the Ensign Universal, particularly for the Starfleet version, means if you use your 2 Universal seats as tactical and you already have Lieutenant Commander Tactical, you could have 3 Romulan, superior Romulan operative trait bridge officers in those 3 seats. So that's nice to have the potential to have 3 SROs on a Starfleet vessel. So I do like the flexibility of the seating. I think the only downside is having the temporal tied to the Lieutenant Commander Universal. That said, I've been able to make this work very well, so I'm pretty happy with the bridge officer seating. I do like it a little bit better than the Eternal, which I did fly for a long time. I have a lot of the experience on the Eternal. I have not flown the Edolg. I do not own one. That's pretty much the top science ship right now, I believe, just because it does have also the Intel seating in there as well. But it does have its own downside, so these Tier 6 Vestas are much more maneuverable than the Edolg, and they are even slightly more maneuverable than the Eternal. So that is kind of the trade-off there. Now, it does have, this particular variant has 4 tactical, 2 engineering, and 5 science. So good console layout. No complaints there at all. Now, the turn rate is 11.5, which is quite good. Impulse modifier of 0.15 and inertia of 45. So very good, very maneuverable ship. Not quite up to escort levels, but definitely a lot better than the Edolg and a little bit better than the Eternal as well. All right, anything else here? It does come with sensor analysis, of course. Subsystem targeting, which is garbage, but who cares? Secondary deflector, which is great. It does come with a hangar bay. Like the old Vestas, the new ones do have a hangar bay. Anything else? The Starship Ability Package. Yes, so it does come with the standard science ability package. Give you your exotic damage at Tier 1, Singularity Gain at Tier 2, Shield hit points, and then Shield regen hardness at Tier 4, and then Heavy Tachyon Mine is the Starship trait. I'll go into the traits just briefly, but I'll just say up front that I was not impressed with any of the traits with the Tier 6 Vestas. Kind of unfortunate. because the trait on the Eternal is actually quite good. So I would definitely not recommend to buy these if you're just looking for a trait. These ones are more ships that if you really want to fly these, then you would buy them. Don't get these just for the trait. All right, and of course, since this is a Romulan version, it does come with a Singularity Core and gets all the Singularity abilities. All right, so that is the kind of the base stats. So that's kind of your, we're just talking about one particular variant. Now what I'd like to do is show you just the differences between the variants. So here is my variant right here that I'm running. This is the tactical variant. This one comes with the Heavy Tachyon Mine trait, which is pretty lackluster. Basically, whenever you, every 30 seconds or so, your energy weapon, whenever you fire, directed energy weapon modes deploy one level 61 heavy tachyon mine. So every 30 seconds, you get a little tachyon mine. It does okay damage, but I'm not a fan of mines, and I don't think this is worth it. Once every 30 seconds, it's just not worth it. There are so many better traits out there. But you can see that, so the differences between the three variants, right? The only thing that's going to change is the bridge officer layout slightly and the console layout slightly. All the other base stats are going to be the same. And of course, the three traits are different. Yes, and they all come with a different console as well. So you got to keep that in mind. So since I'm here on the tactical version, so there was the trait. Here is the console. This is that radiation bombardment matrix. This is part of the Cone of Death. This is really funny. When you activate this thing, it's almost like shining a flashlight out in front of you, and you just kind of shine it on the enemy, and it will bathe them in radiation damage. So you can see there, the clicky is a cone AoE radiation damage. It is a 2-minute cooldown, and it does actually very nice radiation damage. It parsed a little bit lower than I kind of expected, honestly. I'm going to have to go back and do a little more testing on this, but I do like it just because it fits with the Cone of Death theme. And it has really nice passives. It has plus 15% exotic damage, so already great right there for this build. And then it has the 10% flight turn rate, which is also nice. A little bit of extra maneuverability never hurts. All right. So let's quickly head over to the next one. Now this one is the science variant. So you can see when I clicked over, you can see one difference is in the consoles when I kind of go between the two here. You can see it's kind of, it takes like one of the tactical consoles and throws it up here to the science. So you've got, instead of 254, you've got 353. Which I actually like too. Both of those console layouts are very, very good. And okay, so this one comes with the trait, and the bridge officer. I forgot to mention that. Let me quickly bring up here my station, bridge officer station. So you can see here the tactical variant comes with the lieutenant commander tactical. The science variant, which I'm about to show, basically takes this lieutenant commander tactical seat and puts one over here into the universal, and the universal becomes a lieutenant. So you have lieutenant universal, lieutenant tactical, and lieutenant engineering. I think that's not quite as good, in all honesty. I prefer to have a lieutenant commander tactical or lieutenant commander ability in there, because there's a lot of good lieutenant commander abilities. I think having 3 lieutenants, I'd rather have lieutenant commander, ensign, and lieutenant. So I do like this layout better as far as bridge officers. All right, so let's go back to the science variant. The trait for the science variant is basically is kind of a boost to charge particle burst, which I don't use very often, so this trait is not really for me. But there are some niche charge particle burst builds out there that could make use of this. So basically, when you activate charge particle burst with this trait, it will it will disable cloaking systems. It will reduce their shield hardness and shield. So I'm not quite sure. Maybe the scale is good with drain. Maybe there's something you could do with drain in there. So it might have some niche uses, but not really a general use trait. FYI, I did level up all these traits on my Federation character just to try them out, which is why I was not impressed with any of them. But So this is the science version. Now the science version comes with this console here, which is the isometric dispersal array. And this one is actually a pretty good console too. I might swap this out because this one seems to be parsing a little bit better than the radiation one on the tactical. So this one is the clicky on this one is the isometric discharge array, which gives a cylinder, basically a frontal cylinder in front of you, not quite a cone, but still does hit an AoE range. It does heavy electrical damage this time instead of radiation. So it also is a nice frontal damage, exotic damage clicky ability, which is very good. This one gives plus 15% on the directed energy damage and then 8% crit severity. So that's kind of cool. The extra crit severity for the passive there is not bad at all. So that is kind of the science version. All in all, I think the science version, due to the lack of the lieutenant commander seat that you give up for the extra lieutenant seat, I think is probably my least favorite out of the three, although I do like the console layout. All right, so let's go on to the engineering variant here. So the engineering variant, you can see it has a different console layout. Let's go back and forth. You can see basically what it does is it takes one from the science and throws it down there on the tactical. So you've got 3, 4, 4 on this one. And as far as the bridge officer seating, I'll quickly show that as well. So in this case, it's basically instead of getting a lieutenant commander tactical, you're going to get a lieutenant commander engineering, which is also very good. There are some good engineering abilities that will give you the option to throw in like another emergency power ability or higher rank of an emergency power ability, or you could throw in like an aux to Sif. So the engineering one works very well. The bridge officer seating works very well. I think the only downside of the engineering variant is that it doesn't have 5 science consoles, which of course you do want because you want to stack up those plasma explosion embassy consoles. But that said, these builds are so tight, I had problems fitting in 5 anyway. So it's not necessarily a huge loss. You can still get 4 of them in there, and it leaves you, there's plenty of other good consoles to use in the other slots. So I do think the engineering one does work very well. Now as far as trait goes on this one, this is kind of an interesting trait. It might also have some niche uses, but basically it gives you plus all damage resistance and exotic damage resistance whenever you use engineering team, science team, or tactical team, which of course you use a lot. Tactical team I use almost all the time, and even science team and engineering team are both good abilities. So this does trigger off some nice abilities, and it does give you a 9% all damage resistance rating and then a 9 exotic damage resistance rating. That is the interesting thing about this trait. There's very few sources of exotic damage resistance in this game. There's just not very many, which gives this some niche uses. Like I could think even maybe for PvP, this could be a good trait, especially if you can stack up, do a quick like engineering, science, and tactical team all right in a row. You could stack it up to 3 times, give yourself 27% exotic damage resistance rating. That could help in PvP. I could see that. Not a lot of enemies out there that use exotic damage. There are some, but not too many. So not as very general purpose trait, but could have some niche uses, particularly like in PvP. And as far as the engineering console, you get on the engineering variant is this one's kind of more of a drain theme. So if you're going for a drain build, this would be the version for you, the engineering variant, because this one comes with the omnidirectional tachyon wave siphon. So this is a point blank AoE, and this gives the foe minus shields, shield hardness, and gives you some shielding, secondary shielding, which is cool. And it has some passives, gives you Starship Drain expertise, so that's good for a drain build, and then shield restoration. So that's kind of the theme it's going for here on the engineering variant. So hopefully that helps the breakdown of the 3 different variants, right? So just real quick, basically the console layout is slightly different. On the tactical, you've got 2, 5, 4. On the science, you've got 353. On the engineering, you've got 344. And then as far as the bridge officer seating, on the tactical, you've got the lieutenant commander tactical and universal ensign. On the science, you have lieutenant universal and then lieutenant and lieutenant. And then on the engineering version, you have lieutenant commander engineer and then lieutenant tactical and ensign universal. So that is the main difference between the three versions, and of course the console. Now, one thing I should just mention is that the aux cannons have made a return, this time on the Tier 6 ships. They do come with the good old aux cannons, and in fact, for each faction, get their own. So you can see here on the Romulan variant, you get plasma dual heavy cannons. And on the Federation one, you get phaser, and then on the Klingon one, you get disruptor dual heavy cannons. I may someday do a build with these. It's a little bit unfortunate they are locked into a very terrible modifiers here, because they have 2 accuracy modifiers on there. That's already pretty bad. It's very unfortunate. But the nice thing about the aux cannons is, since they're coming off your aux power, it's actually kind of nice because it helps distribute. So like if you're going with a cannon build, your turrets will be using your weapon power and your front cannons will be using your aux power. So that will help kind of distribute your power between those 2 systems. And I've never actually played with that before, but that seems like it might be a decent advantage because you won't be draining so much weapon power or so much aux. It'll be kind of balanced in between. So I would like to give that a try someday. But that is not what this video is about. But I just want to show you that these do come with the aux cannons. All right, so that is a comparison of the 3. Now, just let me extend this to the next point here, which is the differences between the 3 factions. Now, I did go through the base stats of each of the ships. Now, so the difference between the 3 factions, let me just kind of describe it here. So it's basically the Romulan version is the only version that gets a cloak, and it is a battle cloak, and it is very nice. So it gets the standard Romulan battle cloak, and that is the big advantage of this version. Now, compare that to the Federation version. The Federation version actually has slightly higher turn and impulse, or no, sorry, turn and inertia modifiers. So the Federation version is actually slightly more maneuverable. Has the same hull, the 38,000 at level 60 as the Romulan one. It doesn't have the cloak. So that's pretty much the only difference. So the Romulan one gets the cloak, the Federation one is slightly more maneuverable, and then the Gorn version, which is the KDF version of the Tier 6 Vesta, has basically a little bit more hull. So that one's a little bit more durable, but it does not get any extra maneuverability, and it does not get a cloak, which is unfortunate. So that's the difference between the 3 factions. In my opinion, the Battle Cloak is by far the best thing, so I really am liking the Romulan version. Although the Federation version, the extra maneuverability is nice. I do like the Federation version a lot as well. Plus it has the fantastic look as well. If you are interested in all the Federation version, the visuals, I did do a full kit bash video on the Tier 6 Vesta on the Federation side, because I do actually own the Tier 5 Vestas as well, and you can do a kit bash with all of the old Vestas. It really looks fantastic. I'm very impressed with the looks on the Federation side and on the Romulan side. I like the whole deck, the whole Vulcan Dakir mixed with the Warbird. It looks fantastic. All right, so that is the comparison. Hopefully that will help you kind of pick out which variant you want, which one suits your build. Yeah, so let's continue on here. Now, what I would like to do is actually get into the specific build here. So we'll go through the full build in detail and describe all of the gear I'm using here now. And then after that, we'll go over here and take a look at the ship Tailor. But first things first, let's take a look at the ship, the build that I'm using here. All right, so like I said, this is a exotic damage and cannon energy damage, so it's kind of a hybrid build. And I think the hybrid build works really well on these ships because the Tier 6 Vestas fly more like an escort, and they have a lot of tactical seating, They have, with their flexible universal seats, you can make those all tactical. There's plenty of seats to put in torp spreads in there, cannon scatter volley, so it works really well with this particular ship. Whereas I think like the Eternal or the Edolg are more suited for like a pure, no, the Edolg is a little bit, but I think the Eternal is more suited toward like a pure exotic damage build, and the Edolg honestly could go either way. The Edolg is so good. But the Edolg is also very, very slow, which is so this thing being so fast makes it so it's very easy to get into, get enemies into your cannon arc, and to make use of the Cone of Death build where you can get all of your Delphic Tear and everything all going along with your Cannon Scatter Volley and just obliterate everything. All right, so here is the build. So let's go through the equipment first. Now, this is using dual cannons, not dual heavy cannons. Now, for any of you who are aware, dual cannons and dual heavy cannons are actually very, very similar in DPS. But dual cannons right now have the advantage of they actually fire more shots. They have a slightly longer firing cycle than the heavy cannons. So they actually fire more shots per cycle, which really helps with your plasma explosions. Because a while back, Cryptic actually changed plasma explosions to be a per shot proc instead of a per cycle proc. So since this is a science vessel and you've got lots of space for those plasma generating weapon consoles on here, I think it makes a lot of sense to use just regular dual cannons as opposed to dual heavies. You'll take most advantage of those explosions. And that's why when I was going through the parse, I said, that's why plasma explosions are such a major part of this build's DPS. So that is why I went with dual cannons over dual heavies. That said, dual heavies are still very, very good. So if you do want to go with those, I would say go with it if that's what you prefer. They are definitely more bursty. You give your higher, numbers initially, but over time they will do the same DPS. And the regular dual cannons, the non-heavies, they will pull ahead very much when you start including the plasma explosions. So you can see here, I'm using 2 of them, and I'm actually using corrosive plasma as my energy type. I'm only using this because I'm kind of on my Romulan character here. I do like to use plasma weaponry just as my theme for this alt that I'm using. I have an my Federation alt that uses all phasers. I've got a Klingon alt that uses all disruptors, and this particular character just uses all plasma. And since I want to use plasma, I went with corrosive plasma because that is kind of the best damage type out there because of the proc, which does give the chance to reduce all the damage resistances. Makes it pretty similar to disruptors. So I do like the corrosive plasma if you are going with plasma. Of course, on my Federation side, I'm actually using Coalition disruptors, which I think are superior. Coalition disruptors right now are fantastic. So if you're going for like absolute top end damage type, I would go with Coalition disruptors. But like I said, just for fun, I like to use corrosive plasmas, and you can see they perform just fine. And you can see here, I'm not exactly, this one I did get lucky on. I did get damage times 4 on this one. This one I've got crit D3 in a damage, so pretty decent mods. Not perfect, but good enough for my purposes. In my other forward slot here, I'm using a particle emission plasma torpedo. For any of you out there who you like to use exotic damage builds, this is one of the 2 really good torpedoes for exotic damage. And it's not because the torpedo itself does a lot of damage, but this torpedo, plasma emission particle, you can see here in the description, upon detonation creates a plasma particle emission cloud. That cloud scales with your particle gens skill, which is what scales up all of your exotic damage. So that's why this is such a good torpedo for exotic damage builds. You can see those plasma clouds did a ton of damage in my parse, and so it is a very good torpedo to use for exotic damage builds. And just in case anyone out there is not familiar with exotic damage builds, you want to have a lot of a skill known as, let me go here. You want to have a lot of a particular skill called exotic particle generators. Now I'm on the ground here, so you can't see what I have. I'll go out into space before we do the Argala Run, and you'll see all the actual stats in space. But this is what you want to stack up. Exotic particle, EPG, exotic particle generator. This is what improves your exotic damage. A lot of things, a lot of science abilities scale off of this. So that is what you want to stack up. All right. So, but there's only a couple torpedoes that really benefit from it. So the plasma emission particle torpedo is one of them. The other one is the gravimetric, because the gravimetric torpedo will create little gravity wells when it detonates, and those also scale with exotic damage. So that's another very, very good torpedo. So plasma emission particle torpedo, you just can get this off of the exchange. It is a crafted torpedo. You can make your own if you want, but you can get them off of the exchange for, I can't remember what I paid, around 10 million, I believe, and then upgraded it. Also corrosive plasma, if you are interested in these. These are also lockbox weapons. This damage type is out of lockboxes. It's a fairly rare damage type, honestly. Not very many people use corrosive plasma. Like I said, if you were going to do it and you're not going for like a theme build, just go for the coalition disruptors, which are also out of a lockbox. So just pick them up off the exchange and then upgrade them. All right, so there is that. Now, as far as my space set, I am using the Iconian space set. Of course, Iconian space set is so good. I'm using all 4 pieces Iconian because of the Iconian 4-piece bonus. So you can see here the stats. It's pretty typical. Iconian it's just kind of the go-to set. It has good defensive stats, it has good offensive stats, and it has fantastic set bonuses. So here is the deflector array, which I'm using. They're all Mark 14 ultra rares right now. I did not go all the way up to epic, but there you go. They're also very nice because they have the warp core also comes with the hot restarts. Where is it? All regeneration, damage for some. They do come with amp as well on there. Whereas, hot restart automatically removes weapons disabled condition after 1 second. Very, very nice. I believe the shield also gets a hot restart as well. Hot restart automatically removes shield disabled condition. So right there, if your shields or weapons automatically go offline, these 2 things are going to hot restart it right away. So just an awesome, awesome set. The shield is a resilient shield, which is good. On a Science Vesta, maybe you want a covariant, but I still like resilient shields because of the low bleed through. And then here's the impulse as well. You can see when you get up to ultra rare, the deflector array does come with psi CDR, so reduce psi cooldown, which is nice. So there you go. So it's the Iconian set, and let me just bring up the info so you can see the set bonuses. Why everyone loves this set is because of the 3 and 4-piece set bonuses. The 3-piece gives you a team-wide buff for all allies within 10 kilometers. Basically, it gives you a stacking all energy damage. Stacks 3 times, 15% all energy damage for 8 seconds when firing weapons. So it's 5% proc. This seems to be has really good uptime, so it's not too hard to get all 3 of your stacks going. And that's like 45% energy damage. I believe it is Cat 1, but it is 45% all energy damage to all your allies within 10 kilometers. I mean, it's just an awesome set bonus. And then the set 4-piece bonus is a clicky with a 2-minute cooldown. That's kind of like a poor man's attack pattern alpha, honestly. I mean, it gives you a 30, well, not quite as good as attack pattern alpha, but it gives you 33% all damage, 20% max hull, and 10% flight speed for 30 seconds. So it's like a speed, survivability, and damage buff for your whole team. It's just so good. So now there are other sets out there, like you could use the Solanae deflector if you're going for lots of exotic particle gens. There are better sets out there if you're going for like a pure exotic damage build. But like I said, this is a hybrid build. So I do like the set bonuses that this provides, because I do benefit from both energy weapon damage and exotic damage. So that is the set I'm using. Now for secondary deflector, I'm using Deteriorating. As you saw in the parse, Deteriorating seems to do the highest parse. The inhibiting doesn't seem to parse as well. Not quite sure why, but to make use of the deteriorating, you are going to want to use destabilizing resonance beam. So you need to have the DRB on there to get this thing to proc. You can see the mods I'm using on there: 2x control, 2x control X. It gets the EPG shield heal at epic. It also has EPG on there for exotic particle gens, so it gives you a lot of exotic particle gens. And then, of course, sensor analysis plus damage. You always want that because sensor analysis is fantastic, and this increases the buff on it. All right. So yeah, I do recommend the inhibiting. It just seems to parse the best. In the rear here, I'm using 3 corrosive plasma turrets, nothing too fancy, and also the mods are not that great on them. Like I said, the corrosive plasma is one of the more rare energy types. You don't really have your selection on the exchange, so you're often starting with not the top mods, and then as I upgraded them, I did my best to try to get the best mods as possible. But there you go. It is nice. They do work well. Turrets do get off also a lot of shots. They do work well with counter and scatter volley and the plasma explosion console, so it does work well in this build. For the devices, I am using the Temporal Negotiator. This is from the what was this from? The Delta Recruit event, which is unfortunately no longer available. Who knows? Maybe someday this will come back in a Phoenix lockbox event, but for now, that's not attainable. It's just nice to have basically a clicky to reduce all your cooldowns. I'm using Red Matter Capacitor. Now, this thing is available in the Phoenix lockbox. We just had a Phoenix lockbox event. Highly recommend you get a Red Matter Capacitor. It's not even one of the rare ones. I believe it's not one of the ultra rare. I think it is just rare, so it's actually quite easy to get and very well worth it because it gives you the plus 25% to all of your power settings for 20 seconds, which is fantastic. It does also work with some battery Doffs and abilities, so very, very good. Get yourself a Red Matter Capacitor. And I'm also using the Subspace Field Modulator for a little extra survivability. You get this from the episode. It's one of the Davidian episodes, and I can't remember which one. But if you've just gone through the storyline doing your episodes, you will have already probably had one of these. Right there, this is the console that comes with the ship. I already went through this when I was comparing the ships. I'm also using the Delphic Terror Generator because of it also has the bonus exotic damage and crit severity, so very, very good. Actually very similar to this, so this gives you exotic damage as well. Delphic Terror Generator is fantastic on all of your exotic damage builds. One thing I'm not using, which I would also recommend for exotic damage build, is of course the Constriction Anchor over here. Constriction Anchor is fantastic because it also gives the 23% bonus exotic damage. And one thing just to mention is that these consoles, this bonus exotic damage almost kind of works like a Cat 2 bonus does for weapons. It buffs your overall damage. So, once all of your exotic particle gens and everything are added in, then this is a bonus on top of that. So this is a very high, bonus that these consoles give. If you throw the honestly, you could probably swap out the radiation bombardment matrix for this one gives 15, this one gives 23. You could swap it out for the Constriction Anchor. It's hard to say. I'd have to do a little bit more testing on that to see which one is better, but that is an option there. Now this console right here, this is part of the reason. So I did mention there was a console that made me want to pick Romulan to do this video. And this is the console right here. It is the Dynamic Power Redistribution Module. This is a console that comes from the new lockbox, the Undiscovered lockbox. And this actually comes on the Federation ship, which is the Temporal Dreadnought the Federation gets. I believe it's the Atlas class, I believe. And this console is awesome. It is amazing. It is incredible. It is all the adjectives you can think of. I love this thing. It gives you survivability. It gives you damage. It gives you hull regen. And it has some decent passives on top of all that. So, fantastic console. Here's the catch. Since it comes on the Atlas, that means if you're a Federation character, you actually have to buy that Atlas, the Federation Temporal Dreadnought, in order to get your hands on this console. However, Klingons and Romulans, since they don't have access to the Atlas, they can get this from the console reward pack that you get out of the Undiscovered lockbox, which is much easier to get. Which means you can pick up these things on the exchange for much cheaper. I think the Romulan one was about 10K, and I think I picked up the Klingon version for, or it's not K, sorry, 10 million, and I picked up the Klingon version for about 7 million. Well worth it. Very good console. It buffs all of your damage. It gives you this, so you can see here the damage bonus. It gives you 2 self, the clicky does, 40% damage bonus, and it reapplies it every 1 second for 20 seconds as long as your health is above 80%. But you can see this thing also gives you a ton of health hull regen while it's going on. So it's actually not that hard to keep your hull high while this is going. So it's almost like for 20 seconds, that's a 40% damage bonus almost that whole time. That is fantastic. Plus it gives you the damage resistance rating bonus and the hull regen. It's just so good. It's survivability and damage all in one console, and the passives are good. All energy damage and directed energy damage, or all energy damage resistance and directed energy damage. So all around a fantastic console, very good for burst damage. The clicky does have a 2-minute cooldown, but that's pretty common. But you can synergize this so well. I mean, you pop your attack pattern alpha, your tactical fleet, your radiant subatomic pulse from the 4-piece Iconian set, your red matter capacitor, and then you pop this console. You are in insane burst mode, and that's part of how you can get up to 200k on the crystalline entity, because that run was so fast. If you can actually kill the entity within your burst window of 30-second burst window, 20 to 30 seconds, while all of those buffs are going, you just get astronomical DPS. So fantastic console. One thing to mention about this is that it was listed incorrectly. There was actually a typo in the lockbox reward, and it doesn't actually say dynamic power redistribution module. Let me go double check that while I'm here. Let me head over to the exchange, because there was actually a typo, and it was listed as something else. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what the name was. So just be a little bit careful when you go for this. When you buy it off the exchange, it might not have the right description when you buy it. That may have been corrected. That was a couple weeks ago when I bought this now. And this would be, no, reward packs. I think it's still, man, what was it called? Yeah, it still looks like it has that typo in there, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting the name of it, but it does have a different name, so you'll have to look for that if you want to buy it off the exchange. It is a different name listed, because it's a typo of the description of that particular reward pack. All right, so let's continue on with the build here. So almost done with the equipment. All right, so of course we're going to want to put almost skipped over these, but of course the all-important plasma generating weapon signature nullifiers. These are the consoles you get from the Romulan embassy. I don't think I mentioned it, but the Delphic Terror generator is also a lockbox console. You can get this, they're actually fairly cheap off the exchange, along with these, since this is from the Undiscovered lockbox. I won't want to say cheap, but they're below 10 million. They're in that range that they're reasonably affordable for your average player, so they're not like way out of range for anybody. In fact, nothing I'm using on this build really is way out of range. You can use any of these items. Even if you don't have epic, this build works fine. You can use everything that's non-upgraded and still be a very effective build. Just put this build together and then upgrade things over time, and you'll be good. All right, so of course you want to use these. I am stacking up 4 of them. And if you want to get these, you get these, of course, from the Romulan embassy from your fleet. So you have to be in a fleet. You have to go to the Romulan embassy. You have to go to the console I believe it's in the shuttle bay, where you can buy these. They're fairly cheap. You can buy the Mark 10 ones and upgrade them, which I'd recommend. They're very, very cheap. They're like not even 10,000 fleet marks. So I don't remember the exact price, but they're very, very cheap and not even much dilithium. So get your hands on these. I can only fit 4 of them on this build, unfortunately. I think this console does outweigh having a 5th plasma weapon generating nullifier, but you could go for all 5, you know. That works well on this build too. And of course, the Plasmonic Leech. What build would be complete without this? This is still a very, very good console, since, especially on the Romulan side, because as you know, Romulans have lower base power levels. So, and the way Plasmonic Leech works is, as you're firing your energy weapons, it will drain energy from the target and return it to you, and it stacks up with it scales with your Drain X skill, and it will give you, with my build, it will give you about, I think, around 16 or so energy into all of your power subsystems. So it's very, very good. And it's good for science builds, in particular for hybrid builds like this, because it will give you both aux power and weapons power, which is very, very good for this build, and very good for Romulans in general. So once you have this thing going, you pop your red matter capacitor, you're going to be pretty close to capping out all of your power levels. It works very, very well. Okay. Last ones are, of course, just your typical tactical consoles here. These are vulnerability locators. Oh my goodness. I have anti-proton damage on here. Oh no. Oh my gosh, I'm such a noob. It's because I was using anti-proton and I forgot to switch them out for my plasmas. That's pretty funny there, guys. I was wondering why my cannons were parsing a little bit lower than what I thought. Ha. Well, so you can see that this build does pretty good damage. I'm glad I did the parse on CCA, because that would have been embarrassing if I'd done it on like ISA or something, where my cannons would be a much larger portion. Since the crystalline entity resists energy weapon damage so much, the cannons were not contributing a whole lot anyway. But yeah, so that is embarrassing. Let's get my plasma ones back on here. I was still benefiting from the crit chance, but oh my goodness, I feel so dumb. But anyway, so yeah, of course you're going to want to put vulnerability locators on here that match your energy weapon type of your weapons. So of course, since I'm using plasma, I should have put plasma vulnerability locators in here. And there we go, just making sure I've got all plasma. Whew, it's kind of funny. I'm glad I noticed that, or else I would have been gimping myself for a while. So yes, so for these vulnerability locators, you get these from your fleet spire. So this is another thing you need to be in a fleet to get. You go to the fleet spire, you can buy them right from one of the vendors there. These ones are actually more expensive. These are like, I think, 50,000 fleet marks. So you need to do quite a bit of grinding to be able to get your hands on these vulnerability locators, but they are well worth it because of that crit chance they provide over just regular tactical consoles, which don't give you that crit chance. And I stacked up 3 of those. And then finally, for the hangar bay, I'm using the Elite Scorpions on the Federation side. Or sorry, on the Romulan side, I'm using Elite Scorpions. On the Federation side, I use the Elite Runabouts, which I actually really, really like. And the Gorns actually have a new pet on the KDF side. They have their own pet that is actually very similar to Yellowstone. So the Gorn fighters are actually very similar to the Yellowstone. They get a tractor beam, so they're kind of more of a utility type pet, which I actually like. Honestly, hangar pets don't contribute that much damage to exotic damage builds. In general, their damage just does not scale very well. So I prefer to have pets that have a little bit of utility, like the Yellowstones or like the new Gorn pets that have that tractor beam. But in this case, on the Romulan side, I went with the Scorpions. The Scorpions are decent. They still do parse fairly well for a pet. Their damage doesn't scale very well, but if you want to get your hands on the Elite Scorpions, all you got to do is go to your reputation. You got to get up your new Romulus reputation, and you can build them here. Those are all the consumables. Where is the pets? There you go. Elite Scorpion Hangar Pets, ultra rare. Oh, they come in ultra rare for me because of an achievement I got for my temporal operative, but you'll get them at very rare. They're pretty cheap though. You only need 240 Romulan marks. You don't need any, and then 38,000 dilithium. As far as elite pets go, honestly, these are pretty easy to get. So if you're looking for a good elite pet to start out, it does fit well with this ship. It works well, so you can go for those elite scorpions. All right, so that, I believe, covers all of the gear. Let's head over here to skills. Now, my skills are not optimal, but I just want to mention one thing. I'm not going to go through all this in detail. You can see kind of what I'm using here. One thing I do want to mention, though, is that I do make use of the Science Ultimate. The Science Ultimate is very, very good. Here, let me mouse over it here. It's called Probability Manipulation. This gives you a 30-second buff on your ship that provides, so you can see here the two modifiers I got is the penetration. So basically, all of your, it gives you a buff that for all the weapons that you shoot, it applies a resistance debuff onto the enemy, stacking. So it's sort of like a poor man's attack pattern beta, like automatically. And then probability window, which increases the duration, very, very important. You want to get that 30-second duration. But what this thing does is it sets your crit rate to 50%, which is fantastic. So excellent ability. Again, you can pop this, and then within that window of time, for that 30 seconds, you will have 50% crit rate. It's fantastic, particularly for newer characters. This is a really good way to get your crit all the way up to 50% for that window and really dish out the DPS. So I highly recommend the Science Ultimate. The Tactical Ultimate's also pretty decent in some situations, but I think for starting out characters and even through endgame up until you get to some particular niche circumstances, I think the Science Ultimate is the way to go. I do definitely need to respec though, because since I am now using attrition warfare, which I'll get into shortly as I get into the specialization, but since I'm using an attrition warfare build to reduce my cooldown reduction, I really don't need all these points here I put into tactical readiness anymore. And I do want to switch things around. I do recommend, if you're going for an exotic damage build, to pick up Drain Infection. Doesn't parse great, but it's a little bit of extra damage for free, and you can pick it up here. Since you're going so deep into science anyway, it's easy to do. But I'd also move a few other points around here when I respec. But I'm holding off on a respec now because there are some upcoming balance changes that Cryptic has hinted at. They just did a balance changes on the ground, and then the space changes are coming up. So I'm going to kind of wait for that to do a full respec of my skills. I would say just the important thing is just to make sure you pick up the Science Ultimate and pick up some hull penetration as much as you can. And, the crit and crit damage and crit chance are both good traits as well to pick up on the tactical side. All right, so let's go into specializations. Temporal Operative, of course. This is very, very good for exotic damage builds because it gives you +5 exotic particle gens for each point as you invest into it, and that's fantastic right there. Plus, it has a lot of other abilities in the tree itself that help out your exotic damage abilities. It has really good things like Entropic Rider, which parse decently well. It has some other things like Delayed Defense, where when you have dot effects on the enemies, it gives you the -5% resistance rating, so it's more damage there. It even has this nice little trait down here called Continuity, that is kind of like a poor man's invincible trait. Basically, whenever you drop down to almost death, this thing will give you a quick, massive heal / shield heal. So it's kind of like a get out of death free card, but it does have an internal cooldown. It can only trigger once every 3 minutes. So it's not quite as good as Invulnerability trait, but it is very good. It gets the job done. So that is the spec I'm using as my primary. Now, secondary spec I'm using is Strategist. And this thing is all the rage right now. This is the meta because of this particular trait right here, which is the, where is it? Attrition Warfare, right here. So this thing gives you a large cooldown while in threatening stance. So you have to activate threatening stance. If you saw when I started out CCI, I did turn threatening stance on. Yep, so this gives you very, very good cooldown reduction when you're in threatening stance. All you have to do is apply a bridge officer heal to yourself. It works with hazard emitters. It works with science team, it works with engineering team. It works with Ox Sif, which is my personal favorite because it has such a short cooldown. But with all of your basic hull heals, this thing, once every 20 seconds, when you pop that hull heal, it's going to drop the cooldown time on all of your bridge officer abilities. With this trait alone, when you're running in threatening stance, you can almost get all of your abilities down to global. If you do it right. So it's a very, very powerful. You just have to be aware that when you're running in threatening stance, that does buff up your aggro. I am running the minus aggro versions of the embassy consoles, so that kind of mitigates that. But honestly, this build does so much damage, I'm going to get to be aggro anyway, so it's just something you have to be aware of and deal with. But it's worth it for the cooldown reductions. And that's why, because of this one ability, there's actually, I think this almost replaces, like I used to run the Drake build a lot, because there are those damage control officers that will reduce your cooldowns when you do emergency power abilities, and I was doing all of that to reduce my cooldowns, and all of that, all those Doffs, all of the readiness abilities, all of those are a lot less valuable now because of attrition warfare. Of course, you do have to invest into the strategist tree, and you do have to turn the threatening stance on, but it works well. And since, particularly for science-based builds, like exotic damage builds like the one I'm using here, you want those low cooldowns because gravity well, destabilizing resonance beam, you want those off, you want those down to global cooldown, right? So it's good for that. Now, as you saw in my skills, my skill build, there were some readiness. I did have science readiness and tactical readiness. I don't think I need that many points invested in there anymore. I could reduce that down because of attrition warfare. And plus, there's other sources like on the deflector gives psi CDR. So there's enough there where with attrition warfare, it gets almost every ability down to global cooldown. I've had no problems keeping things up, as soon as they are, as soon as possible. I mean, you can't go lower than the shared global cooldown, but it's very good with with the attrition warfare. You can get it down to that point very easily. All right, so that is the trait skills. Yeah, skills and spec. Let's go ahead and go into the traits. Let's go down here to the space traits, of course. I'm using a Fleet Coordinator, very good because it gives you the 2% damage for yourself and all of your team members up to 10%. Since I'm using, you probably noticed this is a fairly squishy build. The Tier 6 Vestas do not have a high hull strength, and I am not running very many heals. I'm only running enough heals for attrition warfare. So I thought I did want some more survivability on this, so I went ahead with Ablative Shell. This is a very good trait. It does pretty significant self-healing on your ship, and gives you that little bit of extra survivability you're going to want. You could pick this up off of this first one, Fleet Coordinator, this is just one of your standard traits everyone can get. You don't have to do anything. But Ablative Shell is a lockbox trait, so you'll have to get this off the exchange. They goes for right around that 10 to 12 million range, so worth it if you can afford it. Romulan Operative, because I am a Romulan on this character, which gives you the extra 1.5% crit chance, 3.8 crit severity, and the extra recharge for your cloaking. Very nice trait. I'm also running Inspirational Leader, and yes, this is one of the things that I'm so thankful for the Infinity Lockbox, because of that has brought down the price on all of these traits, which used to be well over 100 million. They are now very affordable, including Inspirational Leader. So you could buy this off the exchange, but it's a very good trait because it has a 10% chance whenever you activate any bridge officer ability to grant a +10 to most starship skills, and stacks up to 3 times. Very, very good trait. It just buffs like like everything across the board. It just helps like everything. So it's a fantastic trait to have. I am of course running cannon training because this is a cannon build. Cannon training is, one of those standard traits everyone gets. And of course, one of the key traits in any exotic damage build is Particle Manipulator. This one you get from getting your R&D school for science. Right here, you have to get this up to level 15. That will unlock this trait. And I highly recommend you slot this because this trait is fantastic. So this makes your exotic damage and crit chance and crit severity for exotic damage scale with particle generators. So you can see improved crits and exotic damage based on particle gen. Fantastic, fantastic trait. So definitely pick this one up. Key trait for any exotic damage build. Point blank shot just gives you a nice damage bonus when you are close to the enemy. You have to be within 6 kilometers to get any bonus, and I think it maxes out when you get about 2 kilometers away. Gives you up to that 10% bonus energy damage. This trait you get from an episode. And sorry, I'm forgetting which one it is. And I believe it is in the... Yeah, sorry, it's in... I can't remember if it's in Future Proof or the Iconian arc.
One way or another, the war
No, that's the Solanae set. Is it in Butterfly?
The research teams in the Kiana system require your assistance. They have been running thousands
that's
of
the phase set.
Please report to the Kiana system. Our partnership with the Crinum is starting
That's
to bear fruit.
the subspace module.
Please report to the Kiana system. Our partnership with the Crinum is starting to bear fruit.
Yeah, maybe it is in the future tense.
The Iconian War is finally over, and we can
There's quantum
concentrate
phase.
once more.
Yeah, there's more quantum phase.
We've been contacted by the Federation from the 29th
Time and
century.
Tide, no.
The data from the future that you've provided has made it clear.
That's the not cool. My goodness, I don't remember. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was in New Front. No, it's not in that one. Sorry, I can't find it right now, but you do get this one from an episode. Just go through your episode list and see which one. So it's because it is very easy to get. You just got to run that episode, and you will be able to get point blank shot. Self-modulating fire. This is a trait that gives you some shield pen every 45 seconds whenever you have an outgoing crit. So nice little trait to have. This is a lockbox trait, so you can pick it up off the exchange at a fairly reasonable price. Anchored is another trait that I do like to run because it gives you a scaling damage buff when you are stationary, which is some of the time. So a lot of times when you're hammering on a big target like the crystalline entity, you will be standing still for a lot of the time because you just want to line up your your cone of fire and just sit there and stack this up anchored, and it scales all of your damage very well. It also does reduce your damage resistance rating, so it makes you a little more squishy, but you can usually mitigate that. So it's a pretty decent trait. Again, you can pick this up off the exchange. All right, so let's go through the Starship traits. Emergency weapon cycle, because this is such a fantastic trait because of it gives you, whenever you activate emergency power to weapons, it gives you a 30-second buff that gives you reduction in weapon power cost and fire cycle haste. That's just fantastic. This trait is awesome. It works incredibly well with cannons. It works well with beams. It's an all-around great trait. I use it on almost every build. Since this is a cannon build, and to get this trait, you need to get this off the Tier 6 battleships, the faction battleships, so like the Arbiter, you get it off those. So very nice trait to have. Withering Barrage. This is a fantastic trait for cannon builds. This is sort of new to me because I'm new to cannon builds, but this is definitely a trait you want to pick up because it extends the duration of cannon scatter volley by 4 seconds, which makes it so you can have cannon scatter volley up almost permanent because the global cooldown, I believe, is 15 seconds, so it's only 1 second of downtime. That means you're going to have cannon, scatter, volley up all the time. Fantastic trait. For this one, you get this one off of the tier 6 escorts, the faction escorts, so like the Valiant, the Malum, and the Core. You get this ability. I do also run improved feedback pulse. I do like the stacking crit severity and crit chance that it gives you. And since this build just draws so much aggro, any high DPS build, you're going to draw a lot of aggro, particularly in pickup groups. So I find that it's well worth using the improved feedback pulse. You are going to be taking the hits. You know, you're going to have all those hits incoming. And you saw feedback pulse on itself. It does do good damage. It parsed pretty well during that fight, even on the crystalline entity. And there are other missions where it does parse even better. So that's well worth it. This trait you get off of the Krenim Science Vessel, which you got from it was the winter event ship a couple years back. I believe consoles just got their hands on this, actually, on the Krenim Science Vessel. And so if you want to get it now, you're going to have to get it out of the Phoenix lockbox. And it is one of the epic quality ships to get out of the Phoenix lockbox, which is quite rare. So it's actually a very difficult trait to get nowadays. But still very well worth it. If you're going to run Feedback Pulse, I think it is well worth it for the stacking crit chance, and because Feedback Pulse is already such a good ability, might as well run it. The next one I'm running here is this one right here, Exotic Modulation. This one gives you plus 20% exotic damage for 15 seconds whenever you activate a temporal operative ability. This one you get off of the temporal 31st century temporal ships right here. I believe this one you get off the Kronos, which is the cruiser. And it's a very nice trait, plus exotic damage. You know, works well with this build, and you're going to be using those temporal abilities, which I'll show you as soon as we get here over to the bridge officer abilities that we're using. So very good trait to have. And then finally, last one here is Particle Feedback Loop. This one you get off also the 31st century, but this one you get it off the Science ship, which is the Eternal. And this one gives you plus 50 hull pen for 30 seconds, and it stacks 3 times. And this will happen whenever you are using an exotic damage bridge officer ability. So stack 3 times, that's 150 hull pen skill. So that's not bad at all. So those are the traits I'm using. There are other traits you could throw in here. You know, that improve anything that improves exotic damage, particularly on the Romulan side. You could throw like Supremacy in here for the extra power systems, because you know Romulans have such low power. But you're just looking for anything that will increase your exotic damage. Invincible is another nice trait you could slot in here if you're worried about the survivability. This is a very squishy ship. All hands on deck is still pretty decent. I still like it for the captain ability recharge time reduction, but the bridge officer, the science officer reduction time is not that great anymore because of the attrition warfare build. You don't really need it, so this is kind of fallen down a little bit in priority. So those are some other options there. Now, as far as space reputation here, these are all pretty standard. Using precision from the Romulan faction reputation gives you the 4% crit. From Dyson, you use advanced targeting systems for the crit severity. Enhanced armor penetration, which gives you the +5 armor pen, very good trait. What is that from? I'm forgetting what reputation that is from. Hold on just a moment. It's not... Is it Counter Command? No, that's that. Is it Delta? Yes. Yep, it's from Delta. Okay. Just wanted to point you in the right direction there. So yeah, from the Delta reputation, you get enhanced armor pen. From Nukara, I'm running the Aux Power offensive configuration, which makes your all damage and accuracy scale with your Aux Power, and since you are running a high Aux Power as a science build, this is very, very good. It gives you actually a nice all damage buff. This is a Cat 2 buff, so buffs your overall damage after all your Cat 1s are added in. So very good buff. This 5th slot is kind of a flexible slot here. I do like to sometimes use Energy Refrequencer to get the self-heal, based on your outgoing damage. It gives you a self-heal, which is very good. Another one that I like to use is the Aux Power Config Defensive, which gives you a nice kinetic and all energy damage resistance and max hull and shield. That scales with Aux Power, also very, very good from the new Kara reputation. But since I'm kind of lacking self-heals on this, you know, there's not very many engineering slots on this build. I did want to go with the hull regen for this. Now, as far as accurate reputation, I'm just using all of the space ones here. And I do highly recommend that you get the anti-time entanglement singularity. You saw how well it parsed against the CCA. It absolutely annihilates. It is a 5-minute cooldown, so you know it is a long cooldown, but it just parses so well, just so much damage. So it is a fantastic trait, or sorry, active trait for your reputation. You get this one from the temporal reputation. But yes, I do use this one, the Quantum Singularity Manipulator from the Romulan. That's a good one for dropping aggro if you need to, because it does give you a quick temporary cloak, and it also buffs your science stats. So you could actually use this to buff up before you go in and unload all of your abilities. I probably could have considered using that. I should have used that in the parse. So as you can see, I wasn't even optimal in the damage I was doing. I didn't have my plasma tactical consoles on, and I didn't use this ability either. So this is another one you could use to really spike up your exotic damage abilities. Biomolecular shield generator from the Undine rep, just a good defensive ability. And then the deploy sensor interference platform. I don't use it that much because it drops aggro, and honestly I usually want aggro hitting me because of feedback pulse, so I don't really use this one very much. Alright, so those are the traits of the build. Let's take a look at the bridge officer abilities I'm using. Kind of the key component of the build here. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and head up in space because we'll take a look at the stats here in a minute. Yep, we'll go ahead and take a look at the stats here. In fact, I'll show you while I'm up here in space the aux power configuration, how much it gives. So right now it's only giving 2.8% of a Cat 2 buff, but let me just go ahead and hit red matter. You can see it went up to 4.3, and it maxes out I think around like maybe 5-ish%, I think, right around there. So that's very, very good. Good trait to have. But all right, so we're up here. This is one of those Kelvin timeline carrier. That's a pretty cool looking ship. Okay, but here we go. So here are the bridge officer abilities that I'm using. You can see them down here. So in the universal / temporal seat, this is Lieutenant Commander, I'm using channel deconstruction. This is temporal ability, and the reason I use this is because this is your entropy builder. You're going to want this to build up entropy, and then you're going to want, as your entropy spender, you use entropic redistribution in the Lieutenant Commander slot. So those are the two temporal abilities I really, really like to use. They, channel deconstruction doesn't do a whole lot of damage on its own. It's just there to build up the entropy. And then once you get up to those 5 stacks of entropy, you do your entropic redistribution, and that hits hard, hits like a truck. You saw in the parse, it did a lot of damage, and I mean, even the single hit damage on this thing was like 200k. I've had crits of, I think the highest one I've ever seen on parse is like 300 something k. This thing hits like a truck. And it has a pretty low cooldown time, so it's very nice. Good temporal ability. And it fits perfectly with the ship because you can get the rank 3, you can fit that into the Lieutenant Commander slot here. It works perfect. So those are the two temporal abilities I use. Now you can see here, in this universal slide, I did put an engineer here. And thankfully being on the Romulan side, you have a little bit more flexibility because all of your seats can be Romulan bridge officers. And as you know, Romulan bridge officers all get the superior Romulan, or all have it available to get the superior Romulan operative trait, or SRO. So this gives you the flexibility to, for an engineer or for a science bridge officer, you can have SROs on those. Whereas on the Federation side, the only way you can get SRO is through the Romulan embassy in your fleet, and you can only get it on tactical seats. So only your tactical Romulan bridge officers can get it. So on my Fed builds, I actually do put a tactical character here, and that does make me miss out on this Aux to Sif. But in those cases, sometimes I like to use the engineering variant of the Tier 6 Vesta, because that does come with the Lieutenant Commander Engineer, and then you can put the Aux to Sif there. And still use this as a tactical. You can still use all the three universals as tactical, and still get an Aux to Sif 3 on the Lieutenant Commander Engineering. So that works well with that's what like on the Federation side, I actually do prefer the engineering variant, whereas on the Romulan side, I do like the tactical variant, because I can use this universal as an engineer, still get superior Romulan operative, and then it gives me access to, on my tactical, I can get access to Cannon Scatter Volley 2. So that is the first seat there. Now on the Ensign Universal, I do throw a tactical in there to get my TAC team. And on my Lieutenant Commander Tactical, I put Torp Spread 1, Attack Pattern Beta 1, and Cannon Scatter Volley 2. So this Torp Spread 1 is to get those plasma emission particle torpedoes out there, get those plasma clouds going, and doing lots of extra damage over time. And Cannon Scatter Volley is great. Use that with the Withering Barrage to increase the duration and get almost permanent uptime on your Cannon Scatter Volley, part of the Cone of Death build, because it gives you that frontal cone that's always on, gives you tons of damage. Works really well. I'm having a lot of fun with the cannon build. And you got your attack pattern beta, just a solid attack pattern, good for debuffing everything, makes all of your abilities hit harder because it reduces the damage resistance of the enemies. I am running here on the engineering slot, I am running emergency power to Aux and emergency power to weapons, because you want to max out your Aux power and your weapons power. This is a hybrid build, you want both. And this one also increases your control expertise and exotic damage abilities for by a little bit. And of course, emergency power to weapons also procs your weapon cycle trait. What's it called? Emergency weapon cycle. Yeah, so that gives you your emergency weapon cycle trait going. With attrition warfare, both of these are up almost 100% of the time, so no problems there. You can pretty much keep that up permanent. Keep that your Aux power maxed out for all of your exotic damage abilities, because they all scale with Aux power. And then finally, in the Commander Science, I'm putting a Gravity Well 3 staple ability of any any science build. You want that Grav Will, you want to pull everything in. That way your Destabilizing Resonance Beam can hit everything. That's why your Cannon Scatter Volley can hit everything. The Cone of Death build really likes having a Gravity Well, because it compacts all the enemies into that frontal arc, and you can just annihilate them. Right, so then, of course, running Destabilizing Resonance Beam, because this works with our secondary deflector, will proc the effect there. And it does a lot of damage in its own right. It's everything, when you suck everything into the Gravity Well, it'll do a lot of damage. I'm running Feedback Pulse 1, because that synergizes with the improved Feedback Pulse trait, and does good damage on its own. And then I'm running also Hazard Emitters for the extra heal. So I'm only running 2 heals here, the Aux to Sif and the Hazard Emitters, and I don't have any shield heals. So again, a bit squishy of a build. You do get these 2. Aux to Sif does help also, because it gives you that self damage resistance rating. So, I mean, it's not like you just blow up if something breathes on you, but you are a pretty squishy ship. Temporal does help out with that because of the trait where if you get low in health, it will give you that 1 Get Out of Death free card, and it synergizes well with this build. So let's just quickly, now that I'm out here in space, let's take a look at my stats. So this is with 325 exotic particle gens. Honestly, not the best. There's builds out there that get up to like 500 plus. This will go up a little bit once all my abilities are proccing and everything else, but this is just base with just just equipment and everything. But that's the kind of damage it gets. Anything else we should show here? Let's go ahead and get up to speed a little bit. You could just get an idea of the turn rate. It is a, pretty maneuverable ship. It's got a pretty fast turn rate here. You can see what kind of resistances we're looking at. What am I doing? Okay, I was looking at the wrong thing. I was wondering, why is the crit chance so low? Where are you? There we go. Crit chance, 23%. Crit severity, right around 100%. What are we looking at for power transfers rate? Is only 10 per second. Honestly, not the best. That's not... But, since you're doing this is running fewer weapons than most of your like escorts or cruisers. You only got the 2 cannons up front and the 3 turrets. So it's not as big of a deal. And you're going to be doing most of your or a lot of your damage through exotic damage abilities, so it's not as big of a deal to have a high power transfer rate, although it is nice. Running at 16k shields, 24, so again, resistances, still not that great. Right around 18 and then 24% on the kinetic. There's the crit chance. And yeah, 325 exotic particle gens, so there we go. You can see here, my inertia is 45, so my turn rate right now is 21 degrees per second. So pretty solid turn rate. No complaints about the maneuverability of the ship. It is quite maneuverable. The Federation one's even slightly better. And I think that's one of the big strengths of the ship. Out of all of the science ships that actually have a hangar bay, this one is like the most maneuverable. It's more maneuverable than the Edolg. It's more than the Eternal. And those two ships have been kind of some of the top science ships out there. And I think this one compares very well against those. I do like the flexible bridge officer seating because it has that extra universal instead of the fixed ensign science. So yeah, I think this build just really works. It fits well with this ship, thanks to its high maneuverability for a science ship. Combined with the bridge officer seating, it just is a very solid upgrade to the Vesta. It truly is a tier 6 Vesta, and it works very well. While I'm flying around here, you can kind of get a size comparison. There's a scimitar right down there. You can see it's a decently sizable ship. Like, it's not super small. It's bigger than your escorts. It's not huge like a dreadnought. There's a lot of these Kelvin carriers over here, Romulan Kelvin ships. You see here, here's an Eternal. Let's take a look at this. How does it stack up with the Eternal? So you see it's a bit more bulky. It's about the same length as an Eternal, a little bit more bulky. It doesn't have the super sleek design of the Eternal. But yeah, I did fly Eternal for a very long time. The Eternal is a fantastic ship, but I have to say I think I do like the Tier 6 Vestas a little bit better. I do like the improved maneuverability that it gets. I do like the more flexible bridge officer seating, so it just works for my build and my play style. Oh, here is one of the research science vessels. See how this thing stacks up with that. Right around the same size, honestly. Pretty similar size. Maybe a slightly... It's kind of hard to tell here. He went down. So yeah. It's a pretty beefy vessel. It's not tiny like an escort, but it's not huge like some of the cruisers. It's getting a good mid-sized ship. Is that one of the new lockbox? Or no, the new event, not event. Man, what am I thinking here? It's the new, the one you get out of the research and development lockboxes. That thing's huge. It's like the Romulan version of the Enterprise J, basically. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the proper term for these ships. Oh, and speaking of Enterprise J, one just warped in. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Yeah, those things are huge. So it's definitely a lot bigger than the little old Tier 6 Vesta here. In fact, I'm not even like... I'm like a tiny fraction of the size of the thing's saucer section, so... So yeah. Those things are just monsters. They're so hilarious that those are in the game now. But anyway, this is not about the Enterprise J. This is about the Tier 6 Vestas. So, all right, guys. So I think that is the full build. Oh, it's not quite the full build. Let me quickly show you my duty officers. Don't want to forget those. So let's go to roster, active. All right, so here are my duty officers. I am running Agent Nerul. This is from the Delta duty officer pack. If you get the Delta Alliance pack, you get to get this guy. He is nice because it gives you a self-heal whenever attack pattern beta is up, which is nice because I do run attack pattern beta. Handy to have, particularly because, again, this is not the most survivable build, and it is more squishy. You know, it's a science vessel. It's not very tanky, so having that extra self-heal is nice. I am running a con officer for the reduction in tactical team and the little extra, the recharge time it gives. Again, I don't know if this is quite necessary. I've run this officer for so long, but I would consider swapping this out now because I'm running attrition warfare. And I'll give you a couple suggestions of other Doffs you can use here, but this is just what I'm running. Some of the other exotic damage duty officers are super expensive right now, so I haven't got my hands on some of them. I am running with the Exocomp. You get this guy from the... What is it? That event that comes around, the recruitment event that's on the Academy, like the Academy recruitment event that comes around every now and then. You get these for free. Now, the reason I use these is because it gives you a buff whenever you use a battery ability. And believe it or not, the red matter capacitor counts as a battery. You can see when I mouse over it here, it gives me all of the buffs, and that's thanks to this Exocomp. It gives you a 20-second buff to increase damage resistance, perception, stealth, and control expertise, and increases all your power by 5 for 20 seconds. So it's just a very nice little buff that he gives to you when you use red matter capacitor. Using also Warp Core Engineer, again, for the proc whenever you use an aux. Yeah, emergency power ability. So any emergency power ability has a chance to proc this. And 20% chance to give you 25 power levels, which is very nice. It does proc a decent amount. Again, since you're on a Romulan, you need all the help you can get to max out your power levels. So Warp Core Engineer is a good option. I'm also using the Gravimetric Scientist, which has the chance to create the additional gravity wells. Not a huge effect on damage output, but it's kind of cool to see those extra gravity wells popping out. And I'm also running Amsodi, which is this Xindi Aquatic. He gives you, this is the duty officer that gives you your gravity well a chance to knock engines offline. It's a 20% chance each second to knock engines offline. Kind of nice. It just helps pull ships into your gravity well a little bit easier because if their engines get knocked off online, they are going to get sucked in right quick. And it does have a pretty good chance because it checks for it checks every second, so it has quite a good chance of catching everyone into your gravity well. So those are the duty officers I'm using. I did finally ditch my damage control engineers because the Drake build is really not a thing anymore now with attrition warfare, which gives you a lot of space to put other things in here. There is one other thing I'd highly recommend if you have the money. There are the new technicians. There are technicians now that give you a chance to, their proc gives you a chance to increase your exotic damage by 25% when you use emergency power to aux, which I am actually using. So whenever you're using emergency power to aux, it gives you a chance to proc that pretty significant buff to your exotic damage. It's only a 10% chance, so honestly, that doesn't make a huge difference. But I believe you can even get 3 of them, but they're very, very expensive right now. Those duty officers are millions of credits, so a little bit too expensive for my blood right now. But if you do have the money, I would definitely recommend those. That would even boost the damage on this build even more. And yes, any other duty officers? I'm just trying to think here. There's a couple of duty officers that reduce cooldowns, like there's a deflector officer that reduces cooldowns on your anomalies. There's the gravimetric scientist that reduces cooldown on exotics. I don't know how needed those are anymore. Again, with attrition warfare and enough cooldown reduction in this build, I don't see those as being too necessary. So I like to use these with the extra power, you know, the extra buffs to gravity well to knock engines offline. It works pretty well. All right, so that, I believe, is the full build. Yeah. Whew, so that was a lot. Hopefully you're all sticking around for the rest of the video because there are a few more things I do want to show you. I'm going to go ahead and beam back down. Now, I do want to take a quick trip to the Tailor. We'll take a look at the ship visuals. And I also want to show you the Admiralty Card, and then we'll finish up with an Argala Run just to show you some of the consoles in action, some of the other consoles. So let's head back down here. Because this is a fantastic looking ship. I actually like the combination of sort of the Romulan and Klingon, or it's not Klingon, Romulan and Vulcan design from the Dakir. So let's go ahead and just take a look here. If you are wondering how my particular ship, the visuals I'm using, I am using the counter command because the counter command has that nice green glow, and I think that fits really, really well with Romulans. So I use this counter command set on my Romulan ships. I think it does look the best. But we can go ahead and customize here. If you do own all three variants, let's do this real quick. Yep, if you do own all three variants, in fact, I should probably take off these. And disable visuals here as well. So we can actually see what the ship looks like on its own with no extra visuals. But if you do own all three variants, you get access to all three of the appearances, and you can mix and match to your heart's content. Just like the kit bash I did with the Federation side on the Romulan and on the Klingon side as well. But looking at Romulans here, it does give you a lot of options. So you can combine all three of the different variants. You can combine the different hulls, the different saucers. That saucer actually looks pretty cool if you're looking for more sleek design. You can change the Dakir part, which they call the cowling. There's actually one of them here, like this one is the one on the tactical variant, kind of has an open, it's not a closed circle. But the other two are closed circles. You can change the wing flaps. Not a whole lot. There's these right here on the back of the wings. You see there's a couple different ones there. I do like the default ones for the Surla here. That does have the sort of claw looking to it. Looks pretty menacing. But you can also change the nacelles. Those nacelles are kind of cool. Kind of a little more forward sweeping. You can change the lower stanchions, which is right here. Kind of goes below the bottom part of the ring. If you want, that one actually has more of a Romulan look to it, because a lot of Romulan ships have that lower stanchion that kind of goes between the two nacelles, sort of like how the Mogai has that, as well as even like the Dideridex kind of does, although theirs is much more pronounced. And then you can change the keel, which is this little tiny piece right here. Got a couple different options there. So yeah, a lot of mixing and matching you can do. Let me just go through the materials. You've got your two Remans. I didn't think the Remans looked that good on this particular ship. Reman 1 looks okay. Actually doesn't look too bad. You've got your Romulans, different materials here. You got the brown version here if you want to use that. You've got your Type 3, Type 4, your Veteran, which is kind of the light, very light version. You get this if you get the veteran rewards. And then on the upgrade, if you have any tier 5U upgrade that unlocks this skin, this one actually looks really, really good. This is the base skin that I actually use as well. I think it matches well with the counter command. But yeah, lots of visual options here. Let's just do a couple quick randomizes. You can see how it looks. All the pieces do fit very well together. You can mix and match. That one looks pretty sweet. Yes, but I've been very impressed with the kit bashing you can do with the tier 6 Vestas. There are a lot of options. And that's definitely another thing that I would say over a lot of other science vessels, like particularly like the Eternal has almost no customization. The Edolg has nothing. This has just tons of customization. So if you want to have a science ship that you can actually, you know, kit it out, make it look just the way you want, this is definitely the ship for you. All right, so there we go. There are the visuals. Let's go ahead and I really, really do like the counter command look on here. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw these back on. All right, so one other thing I do want to make sure I show is the Admiralty card. So let's take a look at that. What am I doing? Admiralty, where are you at? There we go. Let's go ahead and look at my roster here and head on down. Now, this is really nice because if you buy the pack, you get all 3 variants, and each variant gets its own card, Admiralty card, so you can see them right here. Each variant will have the special ability to ignore any stat modifiers from events for that particular variant. So the engineering variant will ignore plus or minus engineering from events, the tactical will ignore plus minus tech, and the psi will ignore plus or minus psi from events. Very handy to have. So that means if you buy the 3-pack, you will have a way to slot one of these in to ignore you know, a particular mission modifier, you know, for a particular stat. So you have all 3 stat variants. And now looking at the stats themselves, you can see these are all tier 6. They are the very rare, because they are fleet level. They're not, yeah, they're not ultra rare like the event ships. And they're not just regular rare like the non-fleet. So here they are, they're the very rare. So the science version here comes with 28 engineering, 35 tech, and 54. And by the way, it's the same across all factions. Exact same stats on the Federation, 3 variants, and on the Gorn, 3 variants on the KDF side. No difference there on the Admiralty cards. The tactical version is 21, 44, 52, and then the engineering version is 32, 39, 46. So honestly, pretty good stats. Honestly, pretty balanced. You know, and with a more of a focus, like the tactical one is a little more tactical, the engineering one is a little more engineering, a little bit low on the engineering in all 3, which makes sense because these are more tactically and science oriented as far as their bridge officer seating and everything else. Not very engineering oriented, even the engineering variant. So let me just quickly do something fun here. Let's head over to, let's say like we're going to do a, I'll full up right now. Let me just clear one of them. Let's say we wanted to plan one of these out. Let's just throw all 3 of these. Oh, I have them off on missions, don't I? Yeah. But in any case, you could throw them on here. See, like this event is giving you plus psi, so you could throw on the science variant here and get rid of that modifier. It works well. The Admiralty cards are very good, and they're handy because they that ability to eliminate all of the stat modifiers. All right. So guys, we're coming here to an end. I just want to show one more thing in this video, and that is an Argala run. And what I'd like to show is, I'm going to mess up my build a little bit here, but what I'd like to show is all the different consoles, just so you can take a look at them here. And while I'm doing this, these consoles are actually part of a set, and that set bonus goes along with the console you get from the Lucari science vessel from the recent event. So This is from the Lucari. If you own the Lucari Hokun science vessel, you can make it into a 4-piece set along with the 3 pieces, the 3 consoles from the 3 variants. So I am going to mess up my build a little bit here. And try to slot all of these in here. This is not a build I would necessarily recommend using, but I do want to slot these all in so I can give a demo of how each of them works in Argala. And just do a little bit more combat, so you can see how this ship actually looks in combat. Now, outside of CCA, which was, CCA is fun for the parse, but, let's take an actual look at how this thing will do. In, kind of a more slower paced patrol mission, something that everyone can do. And actually get a look at, each of the consoles in action a little more detailed, see the particle effects, see how effective they are, and go ahead and do it that way. Now, since I did slot all 4 of them, let me just quickly give you a breakdown here on the set bonuses. So here's the full 4-piece set. So the 2-piece is a little bit of extra aux power and shield capacity. The 3-piece gives you 50% recharge speed for all of the Explorer consoles. So basically it reduces the cooldown times on all of your console abilities, which is kind of nice because they are actually pretty decent. And then the 4-piece gives you upgrades multi-mission Explorer console power. So basically increases the effect of all of the console abilities. So you have the reduced cooldown and the increased effect. Honestly, for a 4-piece set bonus, as you know, there's a huge opportunity cost by getting rid of 4 consoles for this. I don't think it's worth it because you're giving up way too much to get that 4-piece set bonus. But, it is there, and we'll take a look at it here in action. All right, so let's go ahead and beam up, head over to Argala, and I will try to think if there's anything else I wanted to cover in this build video. So that was a lot of detail, obviously, but I like to actually give people a clue as to where to get all of these, traits and equipment and everything that I'm using. Some build videos just end up leaving you with so many questions like, where'd you get all this stuff? How do I get this trait? So I did want to go into enough detail to provide, that level of a guide as to where you can actually find this and how you could actually build this yourself. What pieces you need to get from a fleet, what you can get from the exchange. And where am I going? Delta Quadrant. So yeah, so that's what makes it take so long, but as you saw from the initial CCA run, this build does do very, very well. This is a really good science vessel. I'm very happy with the Tier 6 Vestas. I think they're perfect for my playstyle. I do like more maneuverable ships, and these are more maneuverable than most of the other science vessels that have a hangar. It's not as maneuverable. There are more maneuverable science vessels out there like the Scryer. The Scryer, doesn't have a hangar bay, but the Scryer is a very maneuverable science ship. It's more maneuverable than the research science vessels that came out recently as well. Those are kind of more sort of cruisery, like the Nebula. So those are kind of their own niche as well, but this is kind of the niche I like. It's sort of like, feels like you're flying an escort, but you have a lot of science abilities and temporal abilities. It just works really well. It goes really good for that hybrid playstyle. You got the cannons, you got the exotic damage, you got everything working together. And hopefully you've seen, hopefully that comes across in the build that I've been showing here. So I just realized before I go in here, I want to make sure I have all of the consoles here on my hotbar so I can use them. So the isometric discharge array, let's get that here. I still got the radiation bombardment, the omnidirectional wave siphon, let's put that over there. And then the protomatter field, which is the huge ally hull regen. This is from the Hokun. So let's jack up the difficulty a little bit here, just to advanced. All right, let's head in. So let's show off all these consoles in action. I'm not going to do it on these first two guys. I'll probably use it, let's see, I'll maybe use it on, what are we looking at here? Kazon, so I'll probably use it on one of the carriers. And also when that 4 spawn comes, I'll have to think about what I want to do there. But yeah, one of the nice things about the Romulan variant is that Battle Cloak. I mean, Battle Cloak on a science vessel is just so awesome. Alright, so make quick work of those dudes. And I'm trying to think here. So I want to use a console on the 4 spawn that's going to come in here. And I think I'm going to use the... Yes, let's use the isometric discharge ray. So I'm going to use a gravity well to suck them all in. Then I'll go ahead and use the isometric discharge away so you get a good look at that. Let's go ahead and cloak up so we have some time to kind of set up how we want here. I'm going to buff up a little bit here. Okay, let's gravity well him in. And then I'm going to use isometric discharge array. There it goes. See that electrical discharge that went out? So it does work very, very well. So for this one, I'm going to go up right up next to this guy and use the omnidirectional. Let's do it on this guy. See if it takes down. So there it goes. It is a point blank AoE. It is draining his shield, although his shield is honestly looking very low. Yeah, maybe that'd be something if you gravity wells everything in and then do that. Might be a way to use that. Yeah, cannon builds are so much fun. They really do. Honestly, their DPS kind of shook me because I've been using, or shocked me because I've been using beam builds for so long. But cannon builds really do have a much higher DPS in that frontal arc. Especially when you got Catter and Scatter Volley going. So what I think I'm going to do here... yeah, let me just quickly show the radiation bombardment console. You can see, like I said, it's almost like you're shining a flashlight on them. And there we go. And it very quickly makes quick work of these guys. But yeah, that's what that one looks like. That one I actually did use in the CCA. That one I do like to use on my build, in the Cone of Death build, just because it has that, it is a frontal cone. And it does work well. But I also want to do a little more testing on this isometric discharge array, which also seems to do quite good damage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, take some damage, and I will show you finally the Hakun Science Vessel console proc that you can use, or console clicky. But I need to take some damage here, and I'm not taking a whole lot of damage. There we go, starting to take some damage. Now this thing is actually a really, really nice survivability clicky. It gives you a huge amount of hull regen and shield regen, and it's actually for your whole team for in a area. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit here. These guys are kind of pitiful. The damage they're outputting is not very impressive. And I think the Benthans have taken aggro from me as well. Hey guys. Alright, well I'm just going to go ahead and click it here. I'm actually kind of curious if it, I don't know if it heals NPCs or not. But let's go ahead and use it. And it goes boom. It makes this big sphere around your ship. You can kind of almost see it. And while that's going, you have a ton of shield and health regen. It's sort of like a poor man's the Samsar console. It works very similar to that. It's a very good survivability console. It's not quite as OP as the Samsar. What is it called? I have it somewhere here. There it is. Regenerative Integrity Field. Yep. It's not quite as OP as that one, but it's still a very good console. If you need just like one console for survivability, that one is a very good way to go. Okay, anything else we want to show here? Let me show this one again. Let's use that one and that one. Let's shine the flashlight in this guy. Get some electricity going. Boom. Alright. Whew. So, there we go, guys. That is the Tier 6 Vesta. This is the Romulan version. And that is the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. This, like I said, I don't know that I've... let me just give kind of a summary here. I'd like to just kind of do a final breakdown of the, advantages and disadvantages of this ship. Because I really do enjoy the ship. I did like the original. Hey, here's a Enterprise J too. These things are all over the place. I really did like the... I'm going to go ahead and back out a little bit just to get rid of this dialogue. There we go. Yeah, I really am a fan of the Vesta. Ever since the original Vesta, that was my first exotic damage build. And, things have come a long way since then. I mean, that was, what, a year and a half ago? Holy cow, I mean, it was a long time ago when I did that video. But a lot has changed, and it's actually a really good time for science vessels right now. Exotic damage builds are very powerful. All the buffs to exotic particle gen with the skill revamp. I mean, just there's been so much buffs to exotic damage, and this is a really good time for science vessels. So yeah, so the Tier 6 Vesta, what can I say? It is just a fantastic ship. I've been loving it in every respect. As much as I enjoyed the Eternal, I almost thought of the Eternal as my Tier 6 Vesta, because for a long time it was kind of the only ship with a hangar, science ship with a hangar, and it kind of felt like the Vesta. But this really is the true Tier 6 Vesta. This is the ship. It's very tactically oriented. It feels like you're flying almost an escort, and it really just is amazing. It has that perfect feel, a combination of an escort and a science ship. It's fast, it's maneuverable. It makes it really easy to get enemies into that front arc, to get all of your science abilities off on them. A lot of science abilities are frontal arc. It works well with cannons. As you saw with this build, the Cone of Death build, it uses cannon scatter volley to really good effect. It puts out amazing damage output. Like you saw in the CCA run, it just really has a really high damage output. It works well. I mean, in ISA runs I've used it on, it works well in every queue I've thrown at it. It's a fantastic ship. And now as far as downsides, the downsides are obvious. Since this is more of an escort type of a science vessel, it is going to be a little bit more on the squishy side, right? That can be mitigated. There are lots of ways to do that. In my build you saw I put in some traits, ablative shell, self-healing traits from self-healing duty officer, self-healing reputation traits. So there's just a lot of things you can do to mitigate that. But it is something you have to be aware of. It is a fairly squishy ship with only 38,000 hull at level 60. That is on the lower end, only slightly better than like an escort. So but it does have the better shield modifier, so you can shield tank it out. It is definitely more survivable than like an escort, but that is one of the downsides. So it is a little bit on the squishy side. The other downside would be the lack of engineering bridge officer seating unless you use the universal. So that's why I kind of do like their engineering variant, because it does give you that lieutenant commander engineer. So that is something that you can look at. If you want to have that little bit of extra survivability, I would think the engineering variant is the way to go. If you're a Romulan, I definitely recommend the tactical variant, give you that extra lieutenant commander tactical, and then you have the more flexible option to use the universal as an engineer or a science to get and still not sacrifice having an SRO bridge officer. Any other downsides I can think of here? The only other downside I can think, or a little bit of a disappointment, was the starship traits. I didn't even really demo them here because they're just not that great. You saw what they did. They're just lackluster all around. Not really worth it. The charged particle burst one might have some niche uses. The other exotic damage resistance one might have some niche uses, but they're not very good general all-around traits. So I would say if you're looking for starship traits, this is not the way to go. Honestly, if you're looking for starship traits, go for the 31st Century, get the Eternal, the Kronos. Those have very good traits, and those are still very good ships. But if you're just looking for ships to fly, and not necessarily the traits, if you already got the traits you want, and you want a good ship to fly them in, the Tier 6 Vestas will do you very well. Any other downsides I can think of? Like I said, the bridge officer seating, I actually got it to work very well with my build, but I will say that there's the downside there of the lieutenant commander universal being the only temporal seat on there. So you have to kind of share, if you're trying to put a particular bridge officer into that universal to shore up your weaknesses, you also have to put the temporal abilities in there. As you saw, I was using, the entropic redistribution and then channel deconstruction, or the forgetting the name of it already. What is it? Channel deconstruction. I got it right. Channel deconstruction. So it kind of, it's hard to make fit. I was able to make it fit, with the build, like I said, but it would have been better to have a little more flexibility on where to put those temporal abilities, the temporal seating. So those are the only downsides, and there's so many upsides. I mean, the maneuverability, the extra universal seats on the bridge officers. So even though you're locked into the temporal being on the universal, you have an extra universal seat on top of that, the universal ensign seat. The console slots, the console layout is fantastic on almost all three variants. I think the engineering one with the not having the 5 consoles is a little bit weaker, but there's so many other good consoles you can fit in there that it's still not a problem. The Admiralty cards are all very good with the ability to remove those modifiers on events, which is very handy. Some of those events have like plus 100 into those, so it's very handy to have a way to remove those modifiers. It comes with those aux cannons, which is another interesting build you could do if you want. That's another advantage. So I mean, just so many good things about the ship. Oh, and visually these ships are amazing looking. I consider that a very good advantage, that you could customize these ships way more than a lot of other science vessels recently. The ability to combine them with the other variants, particularly on the Federation side, the ability to also combine them with the Tier 5 variants. There's just so many options to customize these. So if you were into actual ship customization visually, again, very big advantage for the Tier 6 Vestas. So guys, what can I say? Amazing ship. I've had a ton of fun. This is definitely going to be my main ship now for a long time to come on several of my characters. I'm just having so much fun with these. I really like the cannon build. I like the escort feel. The fact I've played Star Trek Online for so long now that I've really come to really appreciate more maneuverable ships. I've never enjoyed struggling at this point. you know, with my piloting style, the way I like to play now, I just like the more maneuverable ships, and this Vesta really fits the bill. I think that's the only thing with the Edolg. Obviously, the Edolg is like one of the best science vessels out there right now, but it's just not very maneuverable. It's a pain to move that tub around. Again, there's ways to mitigate that with consoles and whatnot, but that's the one thing I like about the Tier 6 Vesta over, you know, some of the other science ships out there. So yes, so is Vesta still Vesta? I say yes. I really love this ship. This is my favorite science vessel now. Currently, honestly, in the game. It just has a combination of maneuverability, excellent damage output, good hybrid build, you know, tactical flavor. It just has that, you know, kind of perfect storm of all the combination of attributes that I really look for in a ship. It is absolutely fantastic, and just visually looks great. No complaints there. So there it is, guys. That is the Tier 6 Vesta. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions or anything, let me know in the comments down below. I will try to answer them. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.